It's likely they will not be reusable if you lose access to the software. People might not have access to the software simply because the file formats become outdated in 5 to 10 years. Let's move on. Let's see if this one is harder. Rita plans to record all the scripted and administrative metadata in a single file in an open format, like a TXT file. Somebody said already? Well, fair or not fair? Not fair. Well done. To have fair data, your metadata must include structural metadata. While open formats are preferred, for interoperability, the relevant metadata might be structured in a meaningful way and ideally according to the standards in your field. Last question. Rita plans to postpone sharing her data until her work has been published in a top journal. What? I'm not clear. Can somebody shout? Not fair. Okay. Do we agree it's not fair? Hands up who says not fair. Hands up who says fair. Oh, we are split now. That's what I wanted to see. Okay, hands up who says not fair again. You're all wrong. Congratulations to the one that says fair. Data can be fair when it's private. I told you this earlier. It's one of the 4 important things I wanted you to know about it. When it's accessible by a defined group of people and when it's accessible by everyone. It doesn't matter. As long as you plan to upload the data in a trusted repository, it can be fair. It might be that you only give access to a small group of researchers within your research project. It might be that those researchers don't publish it until it's published. The kind of the journal is published, the journal article. So I'm sorry, but no, everything was strictly speaking perfect, but very well overall, very well done. Thank you. So we are moving on to the fair data management principles part with Joy, and I have managed to save 1 minute only. Okay, thank you.
All right. So we are going to get into the fair data management practices. And then when it comes to the data lifecycle and stewardship, I will be asking questions and then we'll be answering just from there to save on time. Yeah. Okay. So what I liked about our previous session was when I asked you how do you make data accessible. So you're talking about infrastructure, some of you talked about documentation, some of you talked about continuous update of that documentation, and then some of you mentioned about fair practices. I got that from about 2 or 3 of fair principles and rather fair practices of data. So what we mean by fair data management. So when you're saying, this is from a data management perspective, when you're saying that it has to be findable, means that your data needs to have unique and persistent identifiers. Remember when Maria said that data will be gone after 5 to 10 years, but if it is assigned a persistent identifier, it will be there. It will be persistent. It will always be there. And coming from a continent where there's always upheaval, it means that even if we have civil war in the country that you're in, that data will still be protected. It can still be accessed. So in countries where data is not findable and in situations where there's unrest, we have seen continuous loss of data. This can be done also for indigenous knowledge and also cultural. When you're saying it's findable, it needs to be rich metadata. It's easy for publications when it comes to rich metadata, but then it becomes a bit dicey, for lack of better words, when it comes to indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage because it's quite variant. So it means that there's a need for continuous community engagement to identify how do you enrich your metadata as per the subject areas. Okay? But it needs to be rich. The richer your metadata, the more accessible it is. You need to have clear data and metadata links. This is why, again, this is now where let's be honest, because we're going to get into the persistent identifier conversation. That means when you are sending a persistent identifier, it needs to solve two things: persistence and accessibility. All right. So most of us are using handles, right? We're familiar with handles, isn't it? Handles solve persistence, but they do not necessarily solve the issue of accessibility. That's a reality. So when you're talking about clear data and metadata links, you're looking at by the time you end up having a persistent identifier with and all this rich metadata and metadata links, ask yourself, how far and wide is this data accessible? International databases, government databases, right? So that it can be used. So we need to, by the time now we are choosing to use certain types of persistent identifiers, we need to see what are we trying to solve with that object. Are we trying to make that object persistent? Yes, that is correct. But are we trying to make that object persistent and accessible? Then you have to choose a different type of identifier. This is a very uncomfortable question, but it's the reality. Because we've talked about open data being you have to spend a certain amount of money to make data accessible. So let's not say we want free things, because it's such an easy way to say that Africa is poor and we want free things, and yet that free thing ends up becoming more expensive because your data is not accessible. All right? And later in the session, I'll share with you different types of persistent identifiers and the degree to which they are accessible, so that you can make an informed decision. All right? It needs to be searchable. So connecting, if you have rich metadata and clear data and metadata links, it is searchable. Now, you as knowledge managers work with, depending on the size of your universities, you work with your directorates of research, you work with your DVCs of internationalization, as I say, depending on the size of your university. Some of you have departments on DVCs of internationalization. The reason why I'm mentioning that is that they will be asking for this. How accessible is our data? If we search here, if we are trying to create partnerships, our partners, can they see this data? Can they get this information easily? So the onus is on you to make sure when you're looking at data being findable, you use unique and persistent identifiers. You choose what you want to be persistent and what you want to be persistent and accessible. Okay, so you don't want a situation whereby when we are searching for your data, let's say University of Cape, say okay that they have 13,000 patients, and then in the meeting they say, oh no, we have 15 or 20,000. You understand? It means not all of them are connected and accessible, right? Let there be a difference because there's some information you can actually share, but not that wide. Okay? So that's what we're talking about findable. And it connects to what Maria was saying. Fair can be closed within just a certain community, right? So that the margin of error shouldn't be really that wide. Accessible. So it needs to be the data needs to be retrievable using a protocol, and the protocol is open and implementable. It still comes down to open. The protocol allows authorization when needed and persistently accessible metadata. I hope now you're seeing where we are focusing on persistent and accessibility. So it's just not an issue that, yes, we need to solve persistence. It needs to solve accessibility. And going back to the very beginning, it means that there's an element of cost. And this is a reality we are always going to face. But that foundational cost you make, it means it is universally accessible. That is what you want, all right? Then it is interoperable. It means that the platforms you use, and I like this, all of you talked about infrastructure, that there's a need for internet connection, there's a need for infrastructure, there's a need for interoperable infrastructure. Okay, so the question is, and there was one group that said that they would have thematic repositories connecting into the institutional repository. They're already thinking from the interoperability aspect of data. Some of you are saying that you want this your repositories connected to a national repository. So the question is, ask yourself, what have you done for your infrastructural systems to become interoperable? That is how you make data accessible. So that it can link to other metadata. All right. The consistent vocabularies, and this can be a bit, the taxonomy can be a bit of a challenge when it comes to cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge as well. So you need to have an agreement on some of the basic taxonomy so that you have consistent vocabulary. Because remember, one of you said that continuous updates of the documentation is important, because if you don't update this information, even if you have the rich metadata, people still miss out on it because the vocabularies are not unified. Okay? So it goes back to continuous training, continuous teaching, so that to make sure that your whatever vocabularies you use to make your work interoperable are unified. You need to use formal, accessible, shared, and applicable language. So this is again which is considered as best practice as per the community. The best part is that you're part of it, so it's for you to choose what works for you, right? Then reusable, so it needs to be clear and accessible data usage licenses. And I say that for the open data, you can get the licenses from the open data commons. Detailed provenance, especially for indigenous and knowledge and cultural heritage, especially if you know it is also going to contribute to ethnobotany, ecology. This is where there's revenue coming out of it. So you have to be very careful on detailed provenance. Even if it's a community that contributed to it, it has to be clearly assigned. And today, now we are having identifiers that can actually be provided for each community. So those are conversations we're going to talk about. Rich descriptions with accurate and relevant attributes. So what we normally see in publications is attribution. We thank this community for X. That is not enough. Okay? So ask yourself, what kind of attributions, rich descriptions and attributions are you going to use to make sure that it can be that the data that you have can be reused. Okay, and of course you need to meet the relevant domain standards. Okay? So this is why we have organizations that are producing set standards on how we need to produce our platforms, and they need to be detailed. Now, before we get into this, I have a question for you, and that is, when it comes to the data life cycle and stewardship, how do you manage it within your institute? So I'll get a comment from here, a comment from here, and a comment from here. So when it comes to the data life cycle and stewardship, how do you manage it within your institute? Just your views, your experience. Who wants to share the experience? Or should we pick randomly? Who wants to share from this first row? Yes. So when it comes to the data life cycle stewardship, so meaning the data is collected, how it is managed, how it is collected to the point that it is stored. So that is also the stewardship. Share with us some of the experiences that you go through within your institute. You do this all the time. Yes, there's a comment on this side. There's a microphone here. Ma'am. Okay. How do you do it? Just take us through just 2 minutes. How do you go about it? Okay. There? Oh, not you. All right. Who wants to share? Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
I'm just dropping this. We are looking at the big picture,
Yes.
but in tenant institutions, the information that is not fair. Some group of people have information that should benefit all of us, even internally, institution specific. We are looking at the big picture outside. So I'm just saying that this fair data management, fair information sharing, it's not even applicable in our university institution.
Oh.
So what are you also doing about it before you look at the big picture?
Okay.
I don't know that I get you.
Okay. So what you're saying is that you're already seeing a challenge where your data even within the institute is not fair. Okay? All right? So that is even within your own data life cycle management and stewardship, you're already seeing a concern that not all of it is fair. Okay. So that's a good point. And to left in the preceding slides, you see what I'm talking about. Comments from this side? Just share with me what your observations are within your institute based on what we've talked about. Anyone? Okay. The gentleman at the front. Yes, you. Share with me your experiences. Yes. You don't have any experiences of it. Okay, what about you?
Okay, so well, I work is a research theological institution. So when students are done with their 1 year course of study, they put together a research work, a form of a project.
Yeah.
So when it is done, a list of the students' research topics are sent to the library. Okay, so we make a list of them and make them available on the library's webpage, on the institute website. Okay, so that is one way of giving access to, let me say, those who would like to use or refer to those lists who are not actually within the institute. So we make those lists available on the website for easy accessibility. That's what I can share.
Okay, so it's collating, storage, and making it accessible.
Yes, we are yet to store institution repository.
Okay.
So we don't have one yet.
So yours is not yet fair. So you're going through the traditional data lifecycle management and stewardship.
Yes.
Okay.
So to speak.
Okay. Anyone else from this side? Or on this side? Yes. Would you like to comment? Yes, there are comments on this side.
Thank you very much. What I've realized is that the faculty, in terms of university institution, demanding information as a librarian, demanding information from faculty to make it available for users, like students and researchers. There's a challenge.
Mm-hmm. There's a challenge in letting them have access.
Because we are to go for the knowledge information and make it available for students to access for their research work. And those information coming from the faculty, that is the lecturers, you have a challenge in getting.
Okay. What do you think needs to what do you think needs to be done? Then I'll come to you. What do you think needs to be done to improve it? And then we'll come to you. Yeah, what do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think we need to reorient them for the benefit of making this information available.
Okay, all right. Then for you, ma'am, the lady.
so my place to our research work, the one mainly from the students, it used to be in the hard copy format. And then, so because of that, it's difficult having it online. So we needed to start scanning it to digitalize them. But now we want to stop receiving the hard copies so that they'll submit in on software copies so that it will be easier to have it on a repository platform. But then we also face the challenge of getting research work from lecturers. And one thing we did was that we involved them in workshops. Like if this one in particular, we could have invited our lecturers to be part of it because it has been difficult having them submitting their work to us, their research works for us to upload on our repository. So we are still working on it. We've not had a positive response from them yet. But then most of the times when we have workshops that has to do with data management, research work management, we involve our faculty members as well.
Yes, there's a comment behind. And then there's another on the side. Yeah.
So thank you. One of the reasons why people are not giving out their data or information is fear.
Right.
They are afraid that if I give out my information, how is it going to be used? And so it is important, like he said, that we bring our data generators or our researchers into that conversation.
Right.
That, look, yes, you need to open up your data for 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
And again, assure them that all the open data comes with a license that each whoever uses it must acknowledge you, and so your data will not just be used freely without any acknowledgement, or it will not be lost.
Okay, that's very good.
No, I just want to say that's a really great comment, and some of the comments that you are discussing will be addressed in later sessions today.
Yeah.
So that's how we plan the workshop today. But also to say that this is a train the trainers type of workshop because you are the experts in your institutions. So it's not about inviting the researchers to come here today, invite your academics to come here today, but you being equipped when you go back to deal with them better. So not only what we learned today, but as we said, the resources will be made available, so you will be able to go and disseminate these within your teams, first of all, and also then support you talking to your researchers and your academics. So that is the main objective. This is a training the trainers capacity strengthening workshop. Yes, you are the experts. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm speaking from KNUST. The practice is that if it's about the final product, the system works to make it possible for us to access the final product, which is the research work. So if it is thesis, obviously the student would have to submit it at the graduate school that is brought to the library. If it's about the research publication of faculty papers, our promotion policy enjoins all faculty members to indicate what research they've done, bring it to us to upload it into our institutional repository. If that is not done, your promotion will not be attended to. So in a way, with that, it encourages faculty members to bring their research output to us to upload, so that will be, because we have to produce a report and provide the accessibility link to their research output in our repository. So that's what works for us here at university.
So basically, you took advantage of your policy.
Yeah.
Okay, and that leads to this. So most of you have been taking me through your traditional data lifecycle management, where the data is planned, it's acquired, it's processed, it's analyzed, integrated, and it's stored. Okay, that's what you've been taking me through. And based on the last presentation and connecting to your concerns, this is the new way of data, the data lifecycle management, which also promotes fair open data. So meaning it also protects. You remember you're saying your concern was how do you protect some of that information? And in this conversation, none of you have told me about anything about indigenous knowledge, cultural heritage, and most of your universities are collating quite a bit of that. How is that stored? Most of your universities have a school of social sciences, a school of arts and humanities. You have the research papers. What about what contributed to it? How is everybody was talking about attributions, right? The fear of attribution. So how are you protecting the attribution of the indigenous knowledge and the cultural heritage, yet we've seen the research output. So you're seeing in terms of even the fair bit, a percentage of it is accessible, the research output. But what about what contributed to it? All right? And also at the same time protecting what you've had. And also looking at within your ecosystem, what have you digitized? Some of you have mentioned that you're digitizing books. But if you happen to have indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage, and this is for the schools of social sciences and arts and humanities. It's so easy for health sciences and agriculture. But social sciences and arts and humanities, all that information has to be digitized. That's a reality. So how are those attributions, how is that information attributed, especially if it contributes to research output? How do you make it much more fair? So this is now what I'm taking you through. Yes, can you see the living ones, yeah? The living fonts. But don't worry, as I said, you're going to get a copy of these presentations, and under each slide are notes. So you can actually get more information and references on where we got this information from. So this is a proper, a normative, let me just use that, not proper, normative data lifecycle management, okay, which is fair. So first of all, you're looking at planning and designing. Remember the original one was you plan, acquire, process, analyze, all the way to storing. So this one is you plan and design. And under planning and designing, you need to have data management plans, data policies. I like what you had already said, like the Institute at the back, represented from directory structures. You need to have roles and responsibilities and file naming conventions. So at this point, you know what kind of data that you have within your institute and you plan and design as per all those aspects. Then you collect and create. Out of that, it's the collaborative tools and softwares that the institute will use, the electronic lab notebooks that your institute would have, and then the documentation and metadata. And remember, we're talking about rich metadata. And it is also variant. The richer your metadata, the much more accessible your work, and the easier it is to link the metadata to various databases. Okay? So think of who is going to see this, and they don't have to necessarily Google your institute. They can just click cultural heritage, textile production, traditional textile production, Ghana. And you just get a list of universities that have been doing that. Because you don't have to click even textile, let's say textile production, West Africa, and then you just get a list of universities that are doing research on that. That is based on rich metadata. Everything is interlinked. Then when you're analyzing and collaborating, okay, you need to think of reproducibility, the analysis ready data sets, okay, image management. For those who are in social sciences, arts and humanities, this is where it comes in. For those who are in ethnobotany, ethnopharmacology, your institutes are involved in ethnobotany and ethnopharmacology, and you have herbariums, image management will come in handy. All right. When it comes to cultural heritage and some visuals need to be used for your research outputs, image management will come in and they can be assigned persistent identifiers. So the question is, remember we are debating on, from a part of cultural heritage, what can we release and what can we not release? And connecting to what Maria said, you can make it fair to the community, but not to everyone else. All right? Based on the type of attribution that you want to create. And this comes in especially for cultural heritage and indigenous knowledge. And they are identifiers and ecosystems that can actually support that. All right? Then you're looking at version control. Back to what one of your colleagues had mentioned, that up-to-date documentation. All right? So that is the bit. And then when it comes to the evaluation and archiving bit, You need to look at how you protect yourself from data destruction, archives and records management, data retention, and data security. And all this will connect with the very first part of data policies and compliances. Because if you have those data policies and compliances, this bit of evaluation and archiving becomes easier. It protects you for any future eventuality. All right? And then finally, sharing and disseminating. How are you going to share this data? Okay? The data use agreements and adhering to open access rules. And then two things. One mentioned earlier on, a colleague mentioned that if it is open access, even if you're going to publish this information, you need to see where you publish and the regulations on data sharing. Because you mean well by sharing the data, but you might give out that data and it's still not accessible. So you need to be very conscious. And that connects back to planning and designing on understanding your data policies and the compliances that you're going to have set. And then data use agreements, all right? We need to be very cautious on how we share that data, the kind of partnerships we are going to create. So this is what you're talking about, the novel data lifecycle management. Now, when it comes to publishing and reuse, this is the part that I really enjoy. The aspects of intellectual property comes in, all right? This is now where you need to work with your technical transfer offices to find out, yes, the technical transfer offices and directorates of research. When the research is produced, the first thing they'll need to find out is there an innovation coming out of it. The directorate of research will let you know about that. The technical transfer, how many universities here have technical transfer offices? Unless I'm just 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 3. Do you understand what a technical transfer office is before I continue? No. Oh. Technical is, it's like your IPO office. Okay? So sometimes what happens is that governments give universities the mandate to apply for the patents and trademarks, industrial designs on behalf of the institution, and then they file them and send it to the National Patent Agency office. So those are technical transfer offices. With that said, how many have technical transfer offices in your universities? More? Yeah? Okay? So even if you do not have, these are things that are happening. So sometimes your directorate of research handles it, or sometimes it is the technical transfer office. So this is now issues of intellectual property come in handy, because it's to what degree are we going to share the information? What are we going to file? Then the scholarly products you intend to use. Preprints. Answering your question, so you're scared of sharing your data. If it is published as a preprint, the information is already protected. It's assigned a DOI. It is already protected. The world is seeing it. Okay. If you're worried about your publishing process, you're about to publish. You're going through your journal selection strategy. Instead of your paper, your manuscript staying on your computer, publish it as a preprint. It gets a DOI. All right. And it's already going through the fair process because people are seeing it as you're going through the journal selection strategy. And fun fact, publishers like working with preprint repositories. Why? Because you're closer to publishing your work than work that is not accessible. So look at preprints and publishing and data repositories. That is why we are here. All of us have been talking about data repositories. Use data repositories that solve 2 problems: persistence and accessibility. So the data repositories that will give you persistent identifiers that solve persistence and accessibility. All right? Other than the overall expected management of the data. We want this, whether you're going to make it thematic or institutional, at the end of the day, your objective is by the time you have a data lifecycle management plan, it needs to answer all this. So this is what is the normative data lifecycle management plan. Okay, that adheres to the FAIR principles. So by the time you're reaching the publishing and reusable bit, you'll be asking the researcher, okay, do you want us to publish this as a preprint? You'd have already identified preprint repositories. What data repositories are we going to use? beyond what we have? To what degree are we going to connect what we have to, if it is to the national repository or to other repositories as well? So this is what I am talking about. Are there any questions or comments about this? Yes. Yes.
My own is about the innovations, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
in the field of library and information science. So in my institution is newly established institution, that is the Kebbi State Polytechnic Akingali. Even the Department of Library and Information Science is newly established. So unfortunately, the federal government of Nigeria gave one instruction that any academic institution must create the research and innovation committee. So unfortunately, I was lucky to be part of the committee. So now the issue is that we have been asked to contribute in which area in the field of library information science need to be innovated. And also the issue of fabrications. What are those areas that we need to make the fabrications in the field of library information science? So this is my questions that this is the assistance that I need from my professional colleagues here.
So what you need to improve your library systems?
Yes, in terms of innovations and also fabrications.
Okay, so in terms of innovation, based on even the conversations we've had, you need to make sure your library is able to manage this.
Okay.
It needs to be fair.
Okay.
All right. Yes. At the end of the day, based on what our colleague at the corner say, you need to have a data policy.
Okay.
You start with the data policy and make it fair.
Okay.
All right.
Yes.
And if you have a data policy and a data management plan, these next steps become much easier. But this is literally a step-by-step guide on how you can make your library better, because this is a fair library.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And as I said, below this are notes. Below this particular slide are notes about this, which can support you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. So, another question before we continue? Good. Now we are getting to persistent identifiers. How many of you have heard of persistent identifiers? One. Any of you, other than reading the definition, understand what they do? Okay, who knows DOIs? Fine, who knows cross-ref? We all know cross-ref and data site, right? That is a type of a DOI, and that is a persistent identifier. So one of the things that makes data interoperable, and that helps with the connection of data to metadata and data sets, are persistent identifiers. And there are different types of persistent identifiers. And it's okay that not all of you are familiar with what persistent identifiers are. Because for some, you might know the brand names. Some of you might know Crossref, you might know DataSet, right? Those are persistent identifiers. Some of you might know ROA. That is, some of you know OK, and I see you all have buttons. Okay? OK is a persistent identifier. All right? So what I'm going to take you through is what persistent identifiers are, what they do, and the different clusters of persistent identifiers. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this, because the fact that we're telling you that libraries have to be fair, it means that you need to know what connectors can make your library fair, okay, and what they can do, okay, so that you don't get overwhelmed, because at any one time, you will be using these identifiers. So the question is, what does it work for? And you will be either advising your vice chancellors or deputy vice chancellors to invest in certain types, okay, to make your library fair. All right. So a persistent identifier is a long-lasting reference to a document, file web, or any digital object. A digital object is from indigenous knowledge that you get from the herbarium, music, to data. As object is what you will assign the identifier. All right? It could be a paper, it could be a journal. So journals have identifiers. That is why you insist on telling your researchers publish in a journal that has a cross-ref identifier. Okay? Cross-ref DOI. Because the journal is the object, and then also they narrow it down to the paper being an object. All right? So the object is what you assign the identifier. Most PIDs have a unique identifier which is linked to the current data address of the metadata or the content. So I put a question mark because it is the current one and sometimes that changes. This is going back to you need to constantly update your data because it will pick up and update automatically. All right? Now, there are different types of identifiers. Please. We have contributor identifiers. We have object identifiers. We have organization identifiers. We have project identifiers and aggregated identifiers, because now the identifiers just merging all this because it's a headache for a librarian, okay, on trying to pick and choose what you need to use. All right? Now let's get to it. Contributor identifiers. This is for individuals. Okay? There is the International Standard Name Identifier. There is ORCID, which you have, which is used by most funders. It has been endorsed by most funders, and you already have the buttons of that for that. Maria is going to take us through that. There is the Scopus Author Identifier. This is only unique to users of Scopus. That's it. Okay? There's a hiccup with this because it's not interoperable with the others. You remember I was saying about interoperability? Okay? So you need an identifier that is also interoperable. So you might say you have a Scopus Author ID, but we can't pull it out and get the same information as if you had an ORCID ID. Because with ORCID, it might have more. Okay? Then there's the Researcher ID by Clarivate Analytics. Researcher ID was built out of ORCID, so they are interoperable. All right? So be smart about when you are guiding your researchers. Ask yourself what contributor identifiers, so researcher identifiers, do you want to use? And I will always actually push for ORCID because ORCID has been embedded into funding institutions, government institutions. It's easy to use in ORCID. Object identifiers. Now, this is where it's a bit dicey, so let's not get political about it, but let's talk about it from a fact perspective. You need to ask yourself as a knowledge manager, what type of identifier do I need that can solve persistence, and what kind of identifier do I need that can solve persistence and accessibility? So it's not like it is free. No, it needs to solve those two things. You need your library fair. So the Accra Alliance solves persistence, but unfortunately it is not resolvable, meaning it's not resolvable within the international databases. So you'll just find it as a string solving persistence. So if you have pictures, you have videos, you can use it, but it will solve persistence, but it will not be interoperable. So your information will be locked within your library. Okay? Even if it is put within a registry, it cannot be pulled out because it is not a resolvable link. Okay? Now, then you have the handle net. The handle net is is what you find in most repositories, and unfortunately, it has limited accessibility. So limited to no accessibility, depending on what you're looking for. All right. So as much as you will be proud to say, yes, I use this space and it gives me a handle, no, it will be seen within that ecosystem. It doesn't. If you want accessibility beyond your institute, it's a bit of a challenge. All right. So let's remember Accra Alliance. These are free, handle free, but what doesn't it solve? Accessibility. All right. Then we have persistent uniform research locators. This is where all DOIs, different types of DOIs, fall under. Okay? So Crossref, DataCite, China DOI, IRITI DOI, that is from Taiwan, JALC from Japan, and now what we are producing now in Africa, the Digital Object Container Identifier, that is part of our Open Infrastructure Program, is going to be under the DOI. All of these fall under the DOI. Then we have IGSN. IGSN is for samples. So if you're a biomedical heavy institution, you will need this. You see, you need to ask yourself, what kind of persistent identifier do I need based on my institution? So you will need IGSN if your institution is heavy on cultural heritage samples, okay? You will need this. We also, if it's heavy on earth sciences, okay? You will need IGSN. But at the same time, we are talking with them to see how we can use it for cultural heritage sites. And some of your cultural heritage sites I was discussing with Maria is at the Cape Coast. That is a cultural historical heritage site. You can start assigning identifiers for that. This is the development we are seeing. And of course, I'm sure the University of Cape Coast has done research on those castles, isn't it? And the impact of slavery. So you'll see the research paper, but there is no protection of that cultural heritage site. And let's be honest, the only reason why it hasn't been taken off is because it is solid and on the ground. But we know if you go to the British Museum right now, there's a lot that is from here, isn't it? Okay, so I'm saying there are identifiers that can protect the life cycle. Oh, it is answering one. Of sharing data. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Yeah, now there are persistent identifiers that are there to protect the provenance of your output. Then there's the digital object container identifier. Its purpose is to connect indigenous knowledge and cultural heritage and the outputs that come out of it. All right? So this is targeting School of Social Sciences, School of Arts and Humanities. Those are the schools that people tend to forget. And Institute of Traditional Medicine, where there's ethnobotany and ethnopharmacology. All right? Because you will see the research papers. That's why we are all comfortable saying, yes, you'll see the papers. But then when I ask you, I want to see the indigenous knowledge that led to this, there's a bit of fumbling. You're like, oh, talk to the herbarium. And then when you go to the herbarium, the work is not digitized. It is digitized. You still can't connect the serial number to the paper. And that's how you lose data. Okay? So now, this, as I said, when you're asking yourself about identifiers, ask yourself, what do you want to assign? Okay, there are identifiers for publications, for data, and for what I'm sharing with you here as well. Then we have organization identifiers. Okay, so there's the research organization registry. Okay, now this is for organizations. First of all, these identifiers, this one is free. You just need to give the list of your institution and its affiliates. Okay, and then you get an identifier. What it starts doing is that it starts collating all your output. Now, it's now you as, you remember we're talking about data policies? It's now you as a librarian or a knowledge manager to put within the policy that all researchers within your institute must acknowledge your institute. Whether it is, let's say it is Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, but then its affiliate is known as NUST. Yeah? So you can put the affiliates. So even if somebody writes NUST, it still goes back. Even if they are in partnership with various organizations, as long as NUST was one of the partners, you will pull out that publication. We're talking about proper attribution. So this is free. Another organization identifier is the Open Funder Registry by Crossref. Crossref is one of the sponsors here. And this one is for funders. So if your institution is funding research, you can put this. If a government is funding, you can use this. All right? So then there is a project identifier. Now, this identifier, this is what I'm saying, you as knowledge managers are in a very unique space to reach out to talk to your vice chancellors. So if you are getting the big bucks for projects, you can assign an identifier to this. Because what does that identifier contain? Because it's also a container. It is for project activities, and RAID is not for grants, it's not for researchers, it's not for durable organization units or teams, it's not for software or data sets, it's not for instruments, it's not for samples or specimens. It is for linking activities, so your project will be in partnership with organizations. It will have the outputs that come out of it, the inputs, and everything pertaining that project. So in essence, a RAID has collaborators, organizations, grants, the infrastructure tools that you use. This one would make sense for your vice chancellor and DVCs, okay? And then the data and publications. Then as we are winding up, we are looking at now African originated identifiers. So we have the digital object container identifier. This is what we're producing. And this one, it covers all these identifiers. You see all these in one. Okay? They cover it in one. And then it's for you to ask yourself, okay, we'll have the container, and with your institute, we need a RAID. Remember, the container is the object. All right? It's assigned to the object. Did that object have a research project? All right? Were there papers that came out of it? Were there organizations involved? Were there individuals involved? Then you start assigning, because it aggregates all of them. Okay? It aggregates all of them. So like in this image right here, as I wind up, you can see it aggregates all these identifiers in one. So it makes your life easy as a researcher to choose. Because when these are all aggregated, it's for you to choose, okay, I need identifiers that will help, that will be assigned for this project. I need identifiers that will be assigned for organizations. I need all of them are in one container. And the beauty about it is that you can use it twofold, because you can use it also for indigenous knowledge and cultural benefit. With the container going to the herbarium, that's why I like going back to the herbarium. You can assign to the indigenous knowledge in the herbarium, and literally all the outputs that came out of it, and the projects that came out of that information. So, those are the containers, yes? But as I wind up, I just need you to understand one thing. When you're talking about a fair library, when you're looking at a fair library, you need to be very critical on what will help in connecting the outputs within your library to make them accessible. I hope I have been helpful. Thank you. Yes.
Laura, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I just want to find out. You were talking about aggregation.
Yes.
So, are you saying that when you talk about aggregation, there will be some kind of super ID sitting somewhere that will supersede all the IDs that you have mentioned?
Actually, you're the second person to pick that up. The first one was Rhodes University. So think of Lord of the Rings. If any of you watched Lord of the Rings, there were 8 rings, and then the 9th one was to rule all of them. So because the beauty is that, especially when you look at the DOI ecosystem, the architecture is the same. But each persistent identifier under the DOI architecture is assigned for something different. Remember, ROR falls under DOI as well. Okay? So ROR architecture is the same at the bottom as data site or Crossref. It's just that it focuses on organizations. Data site focuses on data sets. Okay? Crossref, as you've seen the sponsorship here, it focuses on publications, but the underlying architecture is literally the same. So we want the work of a librarian easy. When you have that container, you just have the container, assign it to your object, and then literally pick and choose as per the outputs, based on the outputs, assign the identifiers as per the outputs. Because you're already doing it, but going to different places. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So,
there's a question. Yes.
My question is about software and integration. We all use this space.
Yeah.
So when we are talking about these identifiers, how do we get them into this space to make it more convenient for us to use?
There was a very uncomfortable discussion about this space in June last year at the Open Repositories. They said that this space 7 and above will be much more compatible than those below. So if you are in this space 7 and above, it is easier. And if you are in this space 7 and below, you will need to upgrade. And this was an announcement they made last year. So what I know is that countries are universally trying to upgrade their existing repositories. I know Tanzania got funding for that. Kenya got funding for that, and also Uganda to upgrade through their library consortium their display so that they can be much more interoperable. Yeah, that you need to be above 7. That's the unfortunate. As I say, there will be an element of cost. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Yomi. Okay. I can see you're a bit tired. This is a 30-minute session, but includes some hands-on experience. It's up to you if you want to do the hands-on or whether you want to skip that and do that at home, because we are not giving you any marks or anything. It's up to you what you want to do. But we are going to be talking about the ORCID researcher profiles. And some of you are already wearing the pin that I put in the tables in the morning. And the people from ORCID gave me these pins, the ID, the ORCID researcher profiles. This presentation also comes from them. We work very closely in FIXER with the ORCID people because we are all doing the same, making research data fairer. So I'm just going to present something that is theirs. It's not my content, but I hope you learn from it. Before we start, does anybody know already what ORCID is, or do you use ORCID in your organizations? Do you talk to your researchers about ORCID? Anyone? Can't see any hands. So I can assume that ORCID is very new to all of you. No. Okay. So which one is it? You know about it, but you don't use it. You use it. You have ORCIDs yourselves? How many of you have ORCIDs already? Perfect. Okay. Very good. Why is this not moving? Can the person from the helper please come?
I'm going to help her.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, since you already are using your kit, it's going to be much easier. We'll go through the introduction, what the ORCID ID is, how ORCID helps, and then we'll have the activity to create or enhance if you have your ORCID researcher profile already. Introduction to ORCID. So the facts: independent, not-for-profit, open to participation by all, launched in 2012. Sustained by fees from member organizations. Guided by the ORCID values and funding principles, and you can go and read about those. And community governed by a board of directors representative of the membership. Brought about an option around the world. So there is uses in almost every country on the planet. That's why I thought, you must have ORCIDs because you are the librarians of Ghana and there is users in Ghana. So it cannot be just a researcher but know about ORCID. But member organizations only in 58 countries out of all those 250 that use ORCID. There's not that many member organizations as in national consortia like CARLIGH, and they also have one regional consortium, but in Africa, not that big. As you can see, it's quite wide, especially in Central Africa. Active members, 8.2 million. Active integrated systems, and this is the bit that Joy has been talking about, the integrations. Over 5,000 organizational members, 1,359, and they're working really hard to increase that. So probably that will have increased since I was on the presentation last month. Where does ORCID want to go? This is the vision. ORCID vision is a world where all who participate in research, scholarship, and innovation are uniquely identified and connected to their contributions across disciplines, borders, and time. And that includes all of us. Where are they going to get there? How are they going to get there? The mission. ORCID's mission is to enable transparent and trustworthy connections between researchers, their contributions, and their affiliations by providing a unique persistent identifier for individuals to use as they engage in research, scholarship, and innovation activities. Again, that's what Joy was talking about, how to get people connected to their data. So attribution is important in there. Going back to the comment about people being scared, what will happen if I share my data? If you have an attribution that is clear to you and explained to you, your data is protected from maluse. The ORCID ID. So ORCID provides free services, free infrastructure services. The ORCID ID, which is the mean that we are talking about today, which is the identifier, the unique participant identifier, and it's free to researchers, so everybody can raise and have one. All of us can have one because we all research in one way or another. We produce presentations, we produce guides and other outputs. The ORCID record, which is connected to the ORCID ID, which is your digital CV. Is your profile connected to the ORCID ID that can include employment, education, funding, peer review, research output, and other metadata. So it's a record of your data that you have shared, and also things like the institution where you work and where you study, things like that. And then there is the ORCID APIs, and we're not talking about this today, but just for you to know that this is another infrastructure service that they provide, and this is for their organizational members. It's a set of applications programming interfaces, the APIs, as well as the services and support of communities of practice, enable interoperability between an ORCID record and the member organizations. So again, that fair the I infer interoperability, and that's how ORCID enables interoperability between the researcher, the ORCID record, and the member organizations. So here's the ORCID ID. This person is not a real person. It's a very cute woman that's supposed to live in the US. She's a researcher, and she has, like me, an Hispanic name, which is mainly 2 names and 2 surnames. If I tell you my full name, probably you also have very long names that you don't use. So this is particularly relevant to us, people that have very long names. When I went to the UK, I got rid of my second name, I got rid of my second surname. Nobody can pronounce it, they couldn't understand what they were. In the bank, there was a mess, so I have to get rid of it. But I also have outputs from before that time that I published with my full name when I was a librarian in Spain. So how do you solve that? That's how the ORCID ID helps you with. So this person, how it helps. ORCID provides the ability to oh my god, disambiguate researchers, and this is critical for a trustworthy scholarly record. Most names are not unique, so even if you don't have a very long name or you don't use all your name, there might be some other peers of yours, sometimes even in the same field of research, that have the same name as you, or a very similar name, or you might have changed your name at some point. Some people in some cultures, especially women, adopt their husband's surname when they marry, so they change their name completely to something completely different. So different versions of names, people that have changed their names, people that have the same name as other people that use abbreviations, different alphabets, different naming conventions for different journals. So you can see the picture. And in here we have, the first one is the research article. This is a real article. And there is a lot of people in there. And it's probably too small for you to read it. But if you were to read it, there is a lot of Jangs, Chings, and Wangs. They are different people, but they sound exactly the same. There is a couple of them that you probably see that have the ORCID, the ones have the register ones. The rest is very confusing. The second example, there's a couple of people in here that are called absolutely the same. Kagandesh or perhaps I haven't pronounced that correctly, apologies for that. But they both have ORCID IDs. So they are all individuals. And if you go to their ORCIDs, you'll see they probably have studied in different organizations, they work in different organizations, they all have their own outputs. So that's how you separate them. So ORCID also sells the name variation. So this is the one person, the same person that has published articles with all these different names. TV rundown, caring, event, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to go through it, but you get the picture. So balancing researcher control and data quality, and this is the important bit. It makes your data reliable and is controlled by the researchers. So you have control over your ORCID and what you put in there, and everybody can identify you. How does it balance researcher control and data quality? So researchers own their own records, control who accesses their information, and might change access preference at any time. The organizations where they work, sample, or where they publish might only add information to the ORCID records with the researcher's permission, and might only update or delete information that was added by them. Data quality. The terms of use prevent misrepresentation. False data in records might be disputed by the community, anybody in the community. If you see a record and you know it's not a true record, you can dispute it. Machine learning algorithms detect obvious spam. And remember, we were talking about the data being readable by machines as well. And one of the reasons why it's important is because the algorithms detect spam. And disputing and spam records are removed until they are clarified or made good. So trust in an ORCID record accumulates over time as reliable and trustworthy data sources add information with the record holder permission. So you build a picture over time of who the holder is. So this is a very quick question I'm going to ask you as well. This is about identity validation as part of the solution. So what is actually helpful and appropriate for our use case? Again, this is a traditional government ID that any person might have in any country. This one is from New York State. It doesn't matter, it's a driving license that has a validated legal name, a home address, a date of birth, and the physical appearance of the person because it has a photograph. In the other side, there are validated academic qualifications, educational record, validated funding awards, and previously published works, as in scholarly bona fides, things that we know are true. So which one would be I think we have, oh no, there was a problem with the sound. Anybody? Both? The traditional government ID or the scholarly bona fides or none of them? Anybody? Start up? First one, would that be helpful for our use case of making research data trustworthy and available? Will the first one be appropriate for that? Okay, I think everybody wants to go for lunch. I'm going to give the answer. Oh, it's gone. The answer is gone. So yeah, the traditional government ID is useful if you want to sue the author, for example, but not for much else. It's intrusive from a privacy point of view, and it's difficult to apply consistently around all countries. So really, a traditional government ID is not something that you will ask your researchers for. The other one, on the other hand, is likely a strong correlation with genuine researchers, information that researchers generally make public on their profiles and universally used around the world. So that's why we go for that. Okay, the hands-on activity, as I said, you can do it very quickly. It's actually very quick, especially if you already have an ORCID ID. But you can also do it in your comfort of your own homes or offices when you go back to work next week. It only involves going to obviously orchid.org and either registering or signing into your ORCID ID, creating or enhancing your personal information in your profile. So obviously the ID is created, it's a set of numbers, and I just want you to go and have a go again at creating your profile or enhancing your profile, because there is also lots of things that you can add to that. Publications, You can add your social media, you can funding information if you have any funding for your research, or you can support your researchers. When you want to talk to your researchers about ORCID, you have to done it yourself, yes, just for practice. And then preview your ORCID public record, which is something that is right on the top left, just to make sure that you know how it looks like, and then you're ready to use it. That's all I wanted to say. So that's it. We can have the photograph now, if we are not going to do the activity. And please come to the front.
Maybe before the photograph, we will be distracted. So just one or two announcements.
Okay.
We are submitting the cheat that you need for lunch. We need to do this to avoid intrusion and going to pay for things that we have not used. So we have come to some agreement. And if you can explain that to me.
Good afternoon, colleagues. So today we are using the green color. Kindly keep it well, it's for the rest of the days, for only lunch.
So as you can explain, we have agreed with the teaching on the colors we use on each day.
So today is the green
color.
The
green color. Please help us to monitor how much we pay for. We don't want to, yes, in that order, but we still announce, yeah. So today, tee off your green color as your, and if you haven't, anyone here who has not yet received the cheat, because don't get embarrassed by going there without having the cheat. Is that okay? Then let me also do this important announcement. As part of the agreement that we have from our sponsors, we are supposed to be announcing their sponsorship in our sections. So as I said earlier on, after digital sign, I've signed the contract. I don't want to arrive in the UK, but I still want to.
What?
So let me still announce for those of you who came in late that this program is fully sponsored by Digital Library.
Digital Science.
Digital Science Library, sorry. Yes, you know about that.
Give them a round of applause.
Fully sponsored by them, and we are very grateful. We have a contract signed by the CEO himself with myself for this to happen, and it was very much facilitated by Maria. Maria did very well to get this.
Thank you.
Let me also announce other sponsors, but some of them are here. The conference is also supported by.
We are not in the conference now. Let's have the picture, because today is not the conference. Let's have the picture, because I rushed through this session to be able to have a full hour for lunch, and now you're talking about other sponsors. I don't want to hear. I don't want to hear.
But please,
don't you think, colleagues?
Yeah. So it's also sponsored by Remotest X. I think some of them are here. I think their CEO is even around. GIMPA, our host, and ProQuest, or Claravate, Sabinet. You were very jealous for that.
No, I'm not very jealous. I just want to go for lunch because I want these people to have a full hour.
Yeah, that's fine. But we need to do this. Sorry, it's part of it.
Okay.
Sorry. EBSCO host, Emerald, of course, basically digital science already, Claravate, and Fiction, and Crossref. So it's important. Please let's keep to the time. When we break after the photograph, we go for lunch. Let's come back and have the afternoon session. Thank you very much. So you can come for the photograph now.
Yes, please come for the photograph and be back here for 1 p.m. Please enjoy your lunch.
Actually, they need to get people who give them the money. They need to get the people who give them the purpose for which you gave the money.
Which is right.
Pardon?
Right, it's protecting their interest, which is a natural human phenomenon. No, they don't stop us. Everyone wants to protect their interests. And most sponsors too don't like to acknowledge the safe space, especially when they are competitive. You get it?
That's what she was trying to.
They don't like that they are all providing the same service. Even I think the contract should have gone as gold, silver, platinum, so that you know how the different levels the acknowledgement be. They pick the whole event, like BGMB, because Vodafone sponsors the whole event, their name on top of it. You can't take any telco company plus their telco.
Acha foto.
No, 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 support staff.
Take a picture.
Oh, the camera, yeah,
Only stop level.
no stop level. Let me see professional photographer. It's every time you share picture. And the camera,
Oh, no, it's not.
make I go turn the camera there. Okay, that one's too nice.
Mute am, they come. They come. I'm gonna stop it at that. Ah, it's playing on.
Maybe I could share.
There be a way no. Or what there now? See, ni projector off. He dey play o. Nina, get the plate start. Fele,
Log out down to that thing.
Tibe onyo why you need first.
I was singing along. What you need first from that mountain.
Okay.
Everything I love around the gym.
Let's try to connect.
Eka.
Yeah, signal you know that guy. So I have to say that guy.
But tell me. Tibe go check in ebe nani iso. Onu su.
Yeah, we take again.
Eka. Chahan wodok. Go baba ke.
Hello, colleagues. Once again, it's time for all of us to move out for lunch. You may want to take your belongings with you, but you are under no compulsion to do that.